My sister stole my fiancé 3 days before the wedding, so I gave her a gift she'd never forget. There was 3 days left before I was supposed to marry Cameron. I was in my childhood bedroom, carefully steaming my dress when my phone buzzed. A text from my maid of honor, Violet. You need to see this. I'm so sorry. The video started innocently enough, just wedding guests arriving at the rehearsal dinner venue. Then the camera panned to the parking lot, and my world collapsed. There was Cameron, pressed against his car, kissing someone with desperate urgency. But it wasn't me. It was my sister Delilah, her hands tangled in his hair, her engagement ring, the one identical to mine that she'd gotten 6 months ago, glinting in the parking lot lights. My phone slipped from my hands and shattered on the hardwood floor. I sat there, staring at the broken screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. Cameron and Delilah, my fiancé and my sister, the night before our wedding. The bedroom door burst open. Delilah stood there, still in her rehearsal dinner dress, lipstick smudged, hair mussed. We need to talk, she said, not even bothering to look guilty. When? I managed to whisper. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. When did it start? I clarified, my voice growing stronger. Delilah sighed and sat on my old desk chair, spinning it like she used to when we were kids. About a year ago, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. Maybe longer. Does it really matter? A year. They'd been together for a year while I planned our wedding, while I bought a house, while I introduced him to relatives as my future husband. Why? I asked. She shrugged. He chose me. What else is there to say? Something in me snapped. Get out, I said quietly. Actually, Delilah stood up, smoothing her dress. Cameron's downstairs. We're going to tell Mom and Dad together. You know, break it to them gently. My stomach dropped. Tell them what? That the wedding's off. That he's marrying me instead. She paused at the door. Don't worry, we'll wait a respectful amount of time. Maybe 6 months. After she left, I locked my door and called Violet back. How long have you known? I asked when she answered. I suspected for months, she admitted. But I only got proof tonight. I followed them. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I hoped I was wrong. And because I knew you'd need evidence if you wanted to do something about it. That's when I realized Violet hadn't just sent me one video. I spent the next hour scrolling through her messages. Photos of Cameron and Delilah at restaurants, videos of them entering hotels, screenshots of their social media interactions that I'd been too trusting to notice. The evidence painted a picture of a relationship that had been hiding in plain sight for months. At midnight, I heard voices downstairs, hushed but angry. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. This is not how we raised you girls. Dad's voice was tight with disappointment. People can't help who they fall in love with, Delilah replied smoothly. But the timing, Mom interjected. 3 days before the wedding? Think of the guests, the deposits. The deposits can be transferred. Cameron's voice cut through. Same venue, same date, just a different bride. I had to grip the banister to keep from falling. Same date. He wanted to marry my sister on what was supposed to be our wedding day. That's when the plan started forming. I tiptoed back to my room and pulled out my laptop. If they wanted to use my wedding date, my venue, my carefully planned day, they could have it. But it wouldn't be the celebration they expected. First, I needed help. I called my brother Theo, who lived across the country. It was 3 a.m. his time, but he answered immediately. What's wrong? He asked, his voice alert despite the hour. I told him everything. The affair, the timeline, their plan to steal my wedding day entirely. When I finished, there was silence. Those sick bastards, he finally said. What do you need me to do? Can you get here by tomorrow? I'm already booking a flight. But why? What are you planning? They want my wedding day? They can have it. Every last detail. The next morning, I played the grieving, devastated sister perfectly. I let Mom hold me while I cried. I told Dad I understood that love was complicated. I even agreed to let them keep the Saturday date since everything was already arranged. You're being so mature about this, Mom said, stroking my hair. I'm proud of you for putting family first. If only she knew. Delilah and Cameron went into overdrive planning. They had 48 hours to essentially rebrand my wedding as theirs. The venue coordinator called me in a panic. The bride wants to change everything, she said. New flowers, different music, modified menu. Can these changes be made this late? Whatever she wants, I said sweetly. I want my sister to have the perfect day. What Delilah didn't realize was that I'd been the one handling all vendor communications for months. The venue coordinator was actually my friend Maxine, whom I'd met when she planned Violet's wedding last year. Every vendor on the list was someone I'd personally vetted and developed a relationship with. Wednesday evening, I had dinner with Theo, who'd arrived that afternoon with a suspicious duffel bag. Please tell me you didn't bring anything illegal, I said. He grinned. Nothing illegal. Just some toys from my job in tech security, and maybe a few things from my theater friends. Theater friends? Makeup artists, costume designers, sound technicians, people who know how to create experiences. I smiled for the first time since seeing that video. Thursday morning, Delilah came to my room carrying coffee and wearing what I recognized as my engagement ring. She'd switched them at some point. I wanted to talk about the ceremony, she said, settling onto my bed like we were planning a sleepover. Cameron and I were thinking of keeping most of your original vows, just changing the names. They were really beautiful. The audacity was breathtaking. Of course, I said. Use whatever you want. And I was hoping you'd still be my maid of honor. I know it's weird, but you're still my sister. I stared at her for a long moment. She genuinely seemed to think this was all normal, that I should be grateful to participate in my own humiliation. I'd be honored, I said finally. Her face lit up. Really? Oh, this is perfect. Now it will feel like a real family celebration. After she left, I texted Maxine. Phase 2 is go. Thursday afternoon was the bachelor and bachelorette parties. Cameron was having his at the same bar where we'd first met, another touch that made my blood boil. Delilah wanted to go wine tasting with her friends. Are you sure you don't want to come? She asked as she got ready. I feel bad celebrating without you. No, you should enjoy it, I said. I have some last-minute errands to run anyway. That was true. I spent Thursday evening meeting with vendors, reviewing final details, and making sure everyone understood their roles in what was to come. The florist, my cousin Brielle, was particularly excited about her contribution. I've never done anything like this before, she said as we reviewed the modified arrangements. Are you sure you want to go this far? They stole my wedding date, my venue, my fiancé, and now they want my vows too, I said. This is exactly as far as I want to go. Friday morning, the day before the wedding, Cameron came to see me. He looked uncomfortable as he sat on the living room couch where he'd asked Dad for permission to marry me 8 months earlier. I wanted to apologize, he said, for how everything happened. The timing wasn't ideal. The timing, I repeated. That's what you're apologizing for? He shifted awkwardly. I know this is hard for you to understand, but sometimes love just happens. Delilah and I tried to fight it, but we couldn't deny what we felt. How long did you try to fight it? What do you mean? You said you tried to fight it. How long did you try before you gave up and started sleeping with my sister? His face reddened. It wasn't like that. What was it like? She understood me in ways you never did, he said, his discomfort growing into defensiveness. Delilah gets my ambitions. She supports my career goals instead of questioning them. I'd questioned his career goals because they involved shady real estate deals and cutting corners on construction projects, but apparently my sister had no such moral qualms. I hope you'll both be very happy, I said. Relief flooded his face. I'm so glad you understand. Delilah was worried you'd try to cause problems. Why would I cause problems? Tomorrow is going to be perfect. Friday evening, Theo helped me transform. He'd brought professional-grade makeup, including prosthetics and special effects supplies from his theater contacts. We worked for 2 hours until I looked like someone else entirely. This is either brilliant or insane, he said, stepping back to admire his work. Why not both? The wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m. Saturday. Guests were told to arrive at 3:30. At 3:15, I was in position in the venue's bridal suite, wearing the maid of honor dress Delilah had picked for me, a dusty rose nightmare that made me look like a Victorian mourner. Delilah was in my original bridal suite, getting ready in my wedding dress. She'd had it altered to fit her smaller frame, but it was still recognizably mine. Even her jewelry was mine, family pieces that had been meant for my wedding day. At 3:25, Maxine knocked on the door. Showtime, she said. I walked down to the main hall where 150 guests were seated. These were my friends, my relatives, my coworkers. Cameron's family and friends made up maybe 30 people. Everyone else was there for me. They just didn't know it yet. The ceremony began at exactly 4 p.m. My father walked Delilah down the aisle while I stood at the altar in that hideous dress, watching my sister marry my ex-fiancé in my wedding dress. The officiant, a friend of Dad's from the country club, began the ceremony with the standard opening. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Delilah and Cameron. Everything proceeded normally through the opening remarks and the first reading. Cameron looked handsome in his tuxedo, the same one he was supposed to wear for our wedding. Delilah was radiant in my dress, carrying my bouquet, wearing my ring. Then came the vows. Cameron and Delilah have chosen to write their own vows, the officiant announced. Cameron, would you like to begin? Cameron cleared his throat and pulled out a folded paper. As he began to read, I saw recognition dawn on the faces of several guests. These were my vows. The ones I'd spent weeks writing, the ones I'd shared with my closest friends and family. Delilah, Cameron read, from the moment I met you, I knew you were different. Except he hadn't met Delilah first. He'd met me, and everyone in that room knew it. Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Violet, sitting in the front row, was recording everything on her phone. My cousin Nate looked confused and angry. Even Cameron's mother seemed uncomfortable. But Cameron kept reading, oblivious to the growing tension. When he finished, the officiant turned to Delilah. And now, Delilah, your vows to Cameron. Delilah unfolded her own paper and began reading. But these weren't my original vows to Cameron. These were the vows I'd written that morning, my real gift to the happy couple. Cameron, Delilah read, her voice clear and confident. When I first seduced you in that hotel last March, I knew I was willing to destroy my sister's happiness for my own. She paused, her face scrunching in confusion as she realized what she was reading. I'm sorry, she said to the crowd. I think there's been a mistake with the... But her eyes had already moved to the next line, and her voice automatically continued. I have spent this past year lying to everyone I love, manipulating situations to steal what my sister worked so hard to build, and I regret nothing because I have always been jealous of her success. The murmur from the crowd grew to a rumble. Delilah's face went white as she kept reading, seemingly unable to stop herself. I know that marrying Cameron on the day that was meant to be hers is the ultimate betrayal, but I have always felt entitled to whatever she had. Delilah, Cameron hissed. Stop reading, but she continued, as if compelled. I am not marrying you for love, but because taking you away from her makes me feel powerful, and I hope that every anniversary will remind us both of how completely I won. The crowd was buzzing now. Several people were standing up. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. Finally, Delilah threw the paper down. This isn't what I wrote, she shouted. That's when the second phase began. The large screens on either side of the altar, installed for the ceremony slideshow, suddenly flickered to life. But instead of romantic photos of the happy couple, they showed something else entirely. Security camera footage from the hotel where Cameron and Delilah had been meeting. Time-stamped photos showing their affair timeline. Screenshots of text messages between them, including ones where they laughed about how clueless I was. The most damaging one showed a text from Delilah. She's so pathetic, planning every detail of a wedding for a man who loves me. I can't wait to see her face when she finds out. Cameron's response. Just keep playing along. Free wedding planning. The footage kept rolling. There were photos of them apartment hunting together while I was dress shopping, videos of them looking at engagement rings just weeks after Cameron had proposed to me, screenshots showing they'd been planning to take over my entire wedding for months. The final image was a photo Delilah had sent to her friends, her wearing my wedding dress during the fitting, with the caption, "Stealing sister's life, one perfect detail at a time." The room erupted. "You sick, twisted bitches!" My Aunt Marina stood up, her voice carrying across the entire venue. "How could you do this to your own sister?" shouted my college roommate, Elena. Cameron grabbed for the microphone. "This is all fake. Someone's trying to sabotage us." That's when Violet stood up and addressed the crowd. "I have the original files of all these photos and videos on my phone," she announced, along with metadata showing when and where they were taken. "Anyone who wants to verify their authenticity is welcome to examine them." Several people immediately moved toward her. But the show wasn't over. The screens changed again, this time showing financial records. Bank statements proving that Cameron had been using money from our joint wedding account to pay for his dates with Delilah. Credit card receipts from hotels, restaurants, and shopping trips, all funded by money I'd contributed for our shared future. "I can explain," Cameron shouted, but nobody was listening to him anymore. My brother Theo appeared at the front of the room with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "if I may have your attention." The room gradually quieted. My sister asked me to read a statement on her behalf. He unfolded a letter and began to read. "To our family and friends gathered here today, thank you for coming to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, you've witnessed something else entirely, the complete destruction of my trust in the two people I loved most." He paused, letting that sink in. "Cameron and Delilah have spent the past year living a lie, using my love and trust as a shield while they pursued their affair. They have stolen not just my relationship, but my wedding date, my venue, my dress, my vows, and even my jewelry." Gasps rose from the crowd as people noticed Delilah was indeed wearing family heirloom pieces. But they couldn't steal my self-respect or my ability to fight back. "Everything you've seen today, the evidence, the timeline, the financial records, represents months of careful documentation. I wanted everyone to see exactly who these people really are." Theo looked directly at Cameron and Delilah, who were standing frozen at the altar. "You wanted my wedding day. You have it. Every last detail, including the consequences." The final blow came when the screens showed one last image, a legal document. "Additionally," Theo continued reading, "Cameron will be receiving paperwork this week regarding the house he and my sister purchased together, which is solely in her name. He has 30 days to remove his belongings. The joint bank accounts have been closed, and his access to my sister's assets has been terminated." Cameron's face went from red to white. "The engagement ring he gave my sister has been returned to the jewelry store, where we discovered it was purchased on a payment plan that is now his sole responsibility. The wedding gifts received will be donated to a domestic violence shelter, except for family heirlooms, which will be returned to their rightful owners." At this point, Cameron was trying to push through the crowd toward the exits, but Theo's voice stopped him. "Finally, copies of all evidence documenting this affair have been forwarded to Cameron's employer, since his violation of the company's ethics policies, specifically his embezzlement of client funds to pay for personal expenses, may be of interest to them." Cameron froze. "That's not embezzlement. Using money designated for client property taxes to pay for hotel rooms with your boss's daughter? We'll let the lawyers decide what to call it." That's when I realized Cameron had been using Delilah to get closer to her father, who owned the construction company where Cameron worked. This wasn't just about love or lust. It was calculated career advancement. The crowd was turning ugly. Several people were shouting at Cameron and Delilah. My grandmother was crying. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but I wasn't done yet. I stood up from my position in the maid of honor spot and walked to the microphone. The room fell silent. "I have one more gift for the happy couple," I said. I nodded to Maxine, who signaled to someone in the back of the room. The doors opened, and a server came in carrying a massive, elaborate wedding cake, my original wedding cake, which I'd paid for months ago. "This cake cost $1,200, I announced to the room. "It was supposed to celebrate the beginning of my marriage to Cameron. Instead, it's going to celebrate the end of their relationship." The server wheeled the cake right up to the altar. "Delilah," I said sweetly, "would you like to do the honors?" She stared at me, confusion and fear battling in her eyes. "Cut the cake," I said. "Go ahead. It's your wedding day." Trembling, she picked up the cake knife. "Just cut right into the middle," I encouraged. As the knife sank into the elaborate fondant, red liquid began to pour out. Not raspberry filling, something that looked disturbingly like blood. Delilah screamed and dropped the knife. The blood kept flowing, pooling on the white tablecloth, dripping onto her dress. My dress. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "It's just corn syrup and food coloring, but I thought it was appropriate since you've been bleeding me dry for the past year." The crowd was mesmerized by the spectacle. The red liquid just kept coming, more than should have been possible from a cake that size. "There's a pump system inside," I explained cheerfully. "My brother's theater friends are very talented." That's when the final surprise occurred. The red liquid had activated something in the fondant. The entire cake began to collapse and dissolve, revealing the structure inside. A perfect replica of a house of cards, each card printed with photos from Cameron and Delilah's affair. As the cards scattered across the floor, guests could see the full timeline of their relationship laid out in chronological order. 47 documented instances of infidelity, I announced, each one time-stamped and geotagged. "I'm very thorough." Cameron finally found his voice. "You're insane! You've ruined everything!" "I ruined everything?" I laughed, and it sounded genuinely amused. "You two ruined everything. I just made sure everyone could see it clearly. This is harassment, Delilah shrieked, her voice cracking. This is illegal. Actually, said a voice from the back of the room, it's not. We all turned to see a woman in a business suit walking toward the altar. Patricia Knowles, family law attorney, she said, introducing herself to the crowd. I've been retained to ensure all legal boundaries were respected today. Everything presented here constitutes documented evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and adultery. No harassment charges would be successful. She handed Cameron a thick envelope. Mr. Chen, you're being sued for the return of funds stolen from joint accounts, plus interest and penalties. You have 10 days to respond. Then she handed one to Delilah. Ms. Delilah, you're being sued for the return of family heirloom jewelry taken under false pretenses. You're also named in the civil suit regarding the misappropriated funds. Both of them stood there, covered in fake blood, holding legal papers, in front of 150 people who now knew exactly who they really were. The gifts just keep coming, I said cheerfully. At that point, the crowd started to disperse. Several relatives came up to hug me and express their support. Others left quietly, shaking their heads at the spectacle. My parents approached cautiously. Sweetheart, Mom said carefully, that was a lot. They stole my life, I said simply. I wanted them to understand what that felt like. Dad was staring at Cameron and Delilah, who were still standing in the wreckage of their ruined wedding. Get out of my house, he said quietly. Dad, Delilah started. Get out, he roared. Both of you. You have dishonored this family and broken your sister's heart for what? For him? He gestured dismissively at Cameron. A lying, cheating thief? They left quickly, Delilah still wearing my blood-stained wedding dress. As the venue emptied, Violet and Theo helped me out of the maid of honor dress and into jeans and a t-shirt. How do you feel? Violet asked. I thought about it for a moment. Free, I said finally. For the first time in a year, I feel completely free. The aftermath was swift and devastating for Cameron and Delilah. Cameron's employer fired him within a week after discovering he'd been using client funds inappropriately. The embezzlement charges led to criminal prosecution. He ended up serving 18 months in minimum security prison. Delilah's social media accounts were flooded with comments from people who'd seen the wedding footage. Several guests had recorded everything and shared it widely. She had to delete all her accounts and eventually move to another state. Their relationship didn't survive the legal troubles and public humiliation. They broke up before Cameron's sentencing, each blaming the other for the disaster their lives had become. The house sold quickly. I'd priced it to move fast. With the proceeds, I paid off all wedding expenses, reimbursed everyone who'd given gifts, and still had enough left for a substantial down payment on a smaller place across town. 6 months later, I ran into Cameron at a coffee shop downtown. He looked tired and much thinner. When he saw me, he actually tried to approach. Can we talk? He asked. I don't think we have anything to discuss, I said politely. I wanted to apologize. For real this time. I studied his face. He did look genuinely remorseful. I accept your apology, I said, but it doesn't change anything. I know, I wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away for someone who never really cared about me. Cameron, I said gently, the person you're apologizing to doesn't exist anymore. The woman who would have married you despite all the red flags, who made excuses for your behavior, who put your needs before her own, she's gone. What you did didn't just break my heart. It broke me open enough to see who I really am. And who are you? I smiled. Someone who doesn't settle for less than she deserves. A year later, Delilah reached out through Mom, asking if we could reconcile. She's your sister, Mom said carefully. Family is complicated. She stopped being my sister when she decided to systematically destroy my life, I replied. Some things can't be forgiven, and some people can't be trusted. She's both. She says she's changed. Good for her. She can change somewhere far away from me. Mom looked sad but didn't push further. 2 years after the wedding disaster, I met someone new. Marcus was a veterinarian with kind eyes and steady hands who rescued injured animals and never once asked me about my past relationships until I was ready to share. When I told him the whole story, he was quiet for a long time. That must have taken incredible strength, he said finally. Or incredible rage, I laughed. Both, he said, pulling me closer. Both are powerful forces. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony on the beach, with only our closest friends and family present. No elaborate planning, no stress, no drama. Just two people who'd found each other and wanted to build something real together. My brother Theo was my best man. Violet was my maid of honor again, and this time she cried happy tears during the whole ceremony. Dad walked me down the aisle, and as he handed me over to Marcus, he whispered, "This one's worthy of you." Mom cried through the entire ceremony, partly from joy and partly, I think, from relief that I'd found my way back to happiness. The cake was simple vanilla with buttercream frosting. No hidden surprises, no collapsing structures, no fake blood, just sweetness. On our honeymoon, Marcus and I were lying on the beach when he asked, "Do you ever regret it? The way you handled things with your sister and Cameron?" I thought about it seriously. "No," I said finally. "I regret that I didn't see who they really were sooner. I regret that I wasted so much time planning a life with someone who was planning to betray me. But the way I chose to end things, no regrets at all. Even though it was a little dramatic?" I laughed, especially because it was dramatic. They wanted to steal my wedding day. I made sure they'd never forget it. Marcus chuckled and kissed my forehead. "Remind me never to cross you. Just love me honestly," I said. "That's all I've ever wanted," and he does. 5 years later, Delilah sent a wedding invitation to my parents' house. She was marrying someone I'd never heard of, a quiet accountant she'd met in her new city. Mom asked if I wanted to know any details. "No," I said simply. "I hope she's learned how to be happy without taking it from someone else." But her happiness isn't my concern anymore. The invitation was addressed to the whole family, including me. I didn't respond. Sometimes people ask if I think I went too far that day, if the public humiliation was too much, if I should have just walked away quietly. But they stole more than just my fiancé. They stole my trust, my security, my sense of home. They stole a year of my life, and almost stole my ability to believe in love itself. The gift I gave them wasn't cruelty, it was truth. They wanted to build their happiness on a foundation of lies and stolen moments. I simply removed the foundation and let everyone see what they'd really built. Some gifts are wrapped in pretty paper with shiny bows. Others are wrapped in justice and tied with consequences. Both kinds have their place. And some gifts, like the truth, are so valuable that they're worth giving even when you know they'll never be appreciated. My sister stole my fiancé 3 days before our wedding, so I gave her the gift she'd never forget, the gift of everyone knowing exactly who she really was. It was the last gift I'll ever give her, and it was worth every moment of planning it took.